Welcome to the Boom Clap podcast, where culture and conviction collide. I'm Rita Rogers.
And I'm Cecily Dickey.
We've got a great conversation coming at you today. The birds and the bees conversation, the talk. We're going to talk about that. Before we get into it, I do want to ask you guys to please leave us a review. If you haven't yet, go to Spotify, click the 5-star, Apple, if you listen there, click 5-star and leave us a written review. Those really propel our podcast to new listeners, helps get our podcast name out there. So we really appreciate that. It's a free way that you can help us. We know many of you send us DMs that you enjoyed the episode, enjoy listening. Just simply copy and paste that into a written review. Really, really helps us. We appreciate it. All right. So today we have Mary, Flo, and Megan on with us to talk about the birds and the bees conversation and body image and body care discussion and sex ed classes, and we get into all this. So I do want to warn you that some of these things you might want to listen to yourself if you're listening in the car, maybe without your kids, so that this conversation prepares you to have the conversations yourself with the kids. This is not the conversation to have your kids listen to as a replacement for the conversation. This is us talking about how to talk to your kids. So Mary, Flo, and Megan, they started this because they know that the idea of talking to your kids about sex is terrifying. And it might be the most dreaded part of parenting is what they say. So anyway, they said kids deserve something better and they're here to help. And they definitely are. This conversation was wonderful with them. And it gave us really tangible ideas for how to have these conversations with your kids.
Yeah, there were actually even a couple questions that you would ask like a follow-up question to them. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're going to have an answer for that. And they were just like, boom, there it is. And it's the answer that makes the most sense in the world. And they're just filled with great information about this. And I think a lot of it is going to be from an angle you haven't necessarily heard before. Like Rita said at the beginning, it's a talk today about the talk and how maybe the talk isn't the best way to go about things, and using more of a drip, drip, drip method. So really excited for you guys to hear this conversation.
Yeah. And when we wrapped up, I don't want to forget to tell you guys, Megan said she would give us a discount code because they do have online courses for parents to learn from outside of this conversation. So code BOOMCLAP will save you 20% on their digital courses. While I believe the doctor's office can have its time and place, I am so thankful for the ways that I have learned to take care of my family's health at home, and for the tools that I have in my toolbox, as I call it, to help care for my family when they're sick. One of those tools that I've put in my family's toolbox is homeopathy. And one of the brands that we trust is Remedy Collective. We have their first aid kit, which has a guide with a list of problems that I can go to decide what remedy I want to use. And the first aid kit has just a bunch of remedies that cover almost all of the problems that we will encounter. It's been so helpful for our family to have. If you're interested in learning more about homeopathy and possibly getting a first aid kit for you and your family, go to remedycollective.com/boomclappodcast and use the code BOOMCLAP to save 10% on your order.
Okay, so we have a great conversation today. We have Mary, Flo, and Megan from Birds and Bees. So Mary, Flo, why don't you start off and tell us about yourself and how Birds and Bees started? And then after that, we'll hear about Megan.
Well, thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here. And so my name is Mary Flo Ridley, and my husband Dave and I have been married 44 years. And we have 3 grown married children and 9 grandchildren. So that's a lot of my world is right there in that one sentence. But in 1986, I started getting questions from my own children about, Mommy, how's that baby getting out of there? Or how did that baby get in there? And I grew up in a family where the word sex or anything related to that idea was never discussed, never, ever. I never heard anyone ask or answer a question like that. And so I was stuck and I was looking for a way to figure out, can I answer those questions? I know the answers, but what do I say? And I wanted to answer because they were curious. I knew I would do it differently than my parents. I just didn't know it was going to start that young. I thought I would get those questions when they were preteens. So anyway, it was quite a journey, but as I went through different research and what I found in the Bible, I thought, you can teach right out of the box about creation and about birth and about seeds and eggs and all of the things that are pertinent and that young children can understand to start to build the conversation towards answering the question about how that baby got in there. So anyway, that was something that I just did. I spoke and shared that information with parents who then, it was very organic. They would share it with other friends and then I'd speak at this school or this church. And for many years, just did that on my own. And then Meghan came along and
for many years. I mean, like 15, 20 years.
Well, 18 years on my own and 12 with a nonprofit.
Wow. And all over the country. So at this point it had grown. I'm not trying to.
Yes. No,
She's just saying it got really big.
Yeah. Yes. I did a lot of speaking. Like my high water mark was probably 45 times a year, but it was usually in the 35 times a year kind of thing. But not really marketing, just letting people kind of find out about it. There was no such thing as Instagram or any way to get it out there. And so anyway, it did grow. And that was a really good time for this business because kind of helped me hear all the questions, think through all the answers, just work it out. And so over all those years, my family was growing up and one of my daughter's best friends was Meghan Michelson.
Wow.
I know. But Meghan never knew that Mrs. Ridley had this secret business.
I thought she was just like a lovely, normal mom, not with a secret sex job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
So I'll let her jump in where she jumps in.
So then I was teaching middle school at the time. After undergrad, after college, I was a middle school teacher. And so I was teaching, 11 to 13-year-olds. So you can imagine all the little things I heard in their world. And so one day I was passing out flyers for them to take home to their parents. And it said, parents, come here, Mary Flo Ridley, teach you how to talk to your kids about sex. And I thought, Mrs. Ridley, you do what? And I was at the time very concerned about how sexualized their worlds were. I was not a parent myself yet, but I just thought they seem so young to be talking about these things or, joking about these things. And so anyways, I thought, well, I want to go. I got to hear what Mrs. Ridley's doing. And I want to hear about this for my students' sake. So I went to the program that night and heard what is now the Birds and Bees curriculum. And I left just blown away thinking, wow, every parent has to hear this. And, now looking back, I feel like that is just kind of like the heartbeat the Lord has like placed on me as like a calling of like, everyone has to hear this. Everyone has to hear this. I did not know at the time that meant this would be a new second act for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just left that night thinking everyone's got to hear this because this could change middle school. This could change marriages. We are just not communicating about sex in healthy ways, particularly as a Christian community. And then flash forward years later, I was now a mom and I had heard Mary Flo speak again at our church and I took copious notes. I actually went on a girls' trip the next weekend and I brought my notes and I made all my girlfriends sit down with a glass of wine and said, listen, I've got something to say. And so we were in Colorado.
That was her first time.
Yeah, I sat down. I said, just listen up. And anyways, again, I think the Lord was just kind of shaping my heart and calling me to this work. And we ran into each other and it was meant to be. And I think we got together in 2015, which is wild. And I started training under her. I would just tag along to all of her speaking events and just sit in the back and take notes and just like a little apprentice kind of. Yes. And then we rebranded to Birds and Bees and I started speaking all over. She would still speak all over. And then we created our online course to kind of help digitize the information to get it to more parents. And then in 2021, we really started taking to Instagram. And that is where we're able to reach parents and kind of little sound bites all over the world. So it's been a really cool journey.
Yes.
I
The
would
Lord
say.
has brought us a long way from just one little question from a 4-year-old a long time ago.
And then personally, I'm married. I've been married for 15 years and I have 3 kids, 11, 9, and 6.
Wow. What a cool story. First of all, that I love how you said you didn't know that your friend's mom had this secret sex job.
I know.
Because that would be a bit mind-blowing. Like, what in the world, you know?
It was.
I've only seen you in the kitchen.
Totally.
You know?
And like, I just knew it was the mom who made really good cakes. And so I just had no clue that she did this.
Well, I wanted my children to be able to invite their friends over. So I didn't broadcast it, you know.
So pray for my kids because it's out there.
Yes.
But it's a different time too, right?
Yeah.
So Mary Flo, when you started, like you said, you grew up in a time, or I don't know if it was the time or if it was your family, but sex was not spoken about. And so then you in 1986 get this question and are just like, I want to do it different. And so what was it like for you? Because I feel like you were probably one of the first people. And here you are, this sweet little Texan mama who is, this is probably very outside of the norm. So what did it feel like for you? Did it feel like a giant leap of faith? Did it feel like you were like something you were scared to do? Or was the call so strong that you were just like, I'm ready, whatever may come?
I would say the call was very strong. And I realized at first, I thought, okay, I'm going to go find a book that will tell me what to do to answer these questions to my young child. And there was no book. There was nothing. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start doing some research on my own. And I was so much fun at parties. You know, I would, nice to meet you. Let me ask you something. Did your parents ever talk to you about sex? And if so, what did they say? And was it effective? You know, when did they, I talked to youth ministers at the church. I talked to elementary school teachers, middle school teachers, counselors. And what I kept hearing was, oh no, the 3rd graders come to school with a lot of information. And then the 2nd grade teachers would say, oh no, they already know a lot of this, or these words I hear on the playground a lot. And so it kept dropping, the age kept dropping because I felt it was important for parents to have the power of the first impression. So if that's going to be the case, when are they first hearing about this at school, and how can we preempt the culture, and how can we manage this and get in front of it? And to get in front of it was going to start with body parts. And so I even felt like with my 4-year-old, I missed just a couple of things that I had to catch up on. But I was that person that was just blushing the whole time I was talking. Like I would blush to see these words, much less say them into the face of my child. So I just had to kind of persevere through that. And then I really didn't feel like this was something that I could push out on my own. I didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I really wanted to work on it in a small, kind of obscure way for a while and see how it worked out. And it just kept growing. So it was, it was pretty revolutionary. I have to say that for being kind of a conservative person. I didn't know I was going to be a revolutionary.
Sexual revolution.
Sexual, yeah.
If you will.
So just changing the way parents talk to their kids about sex became sort of an undercurrent desire. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait till they're older. There's so many conversations you can have when they're young, but it's never too late. Like if they're living in your house, it's not too late. You can always catch up with all that information. But Genesis was just huge for me because it really laid out the steps of how to start and where to go. And I thought if the Lord put it in the very first chapters of the very first book, we can bring it up in their early years.
Yeah. No, that's
I don't know if you guys are familiar with Katie Faust at all and her work.
No.
But she's been on our podcast a few times. And one of the things you said in there was you wanted the parents to be able to have the first impression with this topic. And she has mentioned, I can't remember which book it was she wrote because we've had her on a few times, but she's mentioned wherever your kids get the information first, that's who they're going to look to as the expert. So if they're Googling something on the internet, that's the expert. Or if they hear their friend talk to them about sex for the first time at school, that's who they're going to go to when they have more questions. And so I think that's very important what you said about parents having the first impression, so the kids will look to them to be the expert and answer the questions when they have more.
Mm-hmm. And that's something we really emphasize in our course, is just empowering parents to engage in these conversations, because we want them to establish themselves as a loving authority on this topic, and to claim that role. And to do so, you have to be talking. You have to be sharing information. You have to let them know that you know what you're talking about. And I think that's one of our big goals, is to equip and empower parents to be that position of the expert.
Yeah. So as you had mentioned, Rita, who they go to first becomes the expert. And so often that is the computer or the phone or social media or something like that, right? Because internet and everything that goes along with it is so ubiquitous now. It's just in everything. And so that's something we wanted to talk to you guys about, was digital safety. Some of the stats that I got, I think it was right off your website, was that kids are just as likely to be exposed to porn by accident as on purpose. This next stat just blew my mind and broke my heart in such a big way. That children aged 12 to 17 are the largest group of internet porn consumers. I couldn't believe that. And when Rita had mentioned Katie Faust, and the last time we had her on the podcast, we were talking about a book that she had co-wrote and edited. And there was a chapter on porn in there as well. And for some reason, that chapter just really stuck with me and is like, just dug itself into my heart and mind. It's just the porn is just ruining things for so many people. And so I couldn't believe that 12 to 17 is literally the largest group of porn consumers. And then sexting, 18% of boys and 22% of girls that are in the age 13 to 16 age bracket have sexted nude or semi-nude photos of themselves. So, just so heartbreaking. Megan, do you want to talk to digital safety a little bit?
Yeah. So I think also something that's important to be aware of is those statistics now are probably a couple years old. And the one that jumps out to me the most is the sexting. I think those numbers have probably skyrocketed since then. Right. I think now it's like called sending nudes and not sexting as far as like terminology goes, but like who cares about being accurate or not? It's all the same.
We're doing it.
Yeah, it's happening. Because, kids are getting phones younger and younger, and those statistics, even if they're, let's say, call them 5 years old, so much has changed digitally. Anyways, long story short is this is a huge problem with young kids. And it's something I feel really passionate about, because I think so often, because it's such a dark topic and it's so, parents are like, oh, it's so heavy and dark and scary and icky, I don't want to talk about this. And so what happens is we kind of just like leave it all in the dark, and decide like, oh, not us. Like we're good folk, we're good people. We go to church, we don't do that. We have our phones are locked down or all these things. But the reality is it's out there. And, we talk all the time, like there's so many external filters you can put on your devices, on your Wi-Fi, your routers, all those. And all those are good things. So, do the research for these external filters. But these conversations we can have with our young kids, and the importance of talking to your kids about pornography, which we'll get to in a second. But all those conversations create internal filters for your kids. And those internal filters are the only ones that can go everywhere you go or everywhere they go. You could be a device-free family, and then somebody on the bus says, hey, look at this. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you have things locked down or not, if somebody's sharing something like that. So I think our biggest message we want to get out to parents is twofold. One, wake up. This is a huge reality and a huge problem. And so I always kind of say, I want to lovingly pull your pretty heads out of the sand, because that's where we want to be, particularly as Christian parents. I think particularly as Christian parents in the church, we think, oh, I don't want to talk about this. This is icky and freaky and weird and not me.
Yeah, you don't want to believe that it can happen to your kids, right?
Right, exactly. For sure. And so I think I want to really pull people's heads up and say, okay, wake up. This actually is very likely to happen to your child. So pay attention. So be aware. And then of course it's all scary statistics, but our goal is to not just scare you and leave you there. What we want to do is equip you to move towards your kids with this topic. And so how do we talk to our young kids about pornography? How do we protect them? And so I think what we have to do is treat pornography just like any other danger in their day-to-day life. And just understand that this is a reality that they face, just in the same way that when a young child, a 4-year-old, walks into the kitchen, and if you're cooking and the stove's on, you say to them, "Oh, sweetheart, be careful, that stove's hot." Do we say that one time? No, we say that every time they come into the kitchen. Do we make it a very emotionally heavy conversation and sit them down and say, "I want to show you what 3rd-degree burns look like"? No, we don't. We just say, "Hey, careful, that stove's hot," or crossing the street. You engage with other adults too. "Hey, can you help him cross the street? I've got to get this stroller. Can you do this?" Like, we are just talking about it because it's a real danger. And that's what we want parents to do with pornography. They can start at a very young age of, having a game on the iPad or something and saying, "Oh, sweetheart, mom's going to type the code in," because we just want to be really careful around screens.
Yeah.
And just from an early age, establishing that there is a danger out there. We're not scaring them, but we're saying, "Hey, we've got to be careful around screens because there are some really good things on here, but there also can be bad things. And we've got to be careful with what our eyes see." Yeah. And these are phrases that you should be using often. And that's what we really want to encourage parents, because I think so often a phrase we love to use is that the devil loves the darkness. And I think he loves the idea that we're not talking about this and we're afraid to talk about this. And we just, whispers. And like, maybe we'll just put on a device, check that box of a filter. It's like, no, you have to engage, and so the ideas with a 3 or 4 or 5, 6-year-old might be about good pictures and bad pictures. But as they get older, talking about pornography. And I think it's important to frame it as, it is pornography against us. It is not me against you. Like, it is out here to get you, and we're going to be on guard. And so I really want to encourage Christian parents in particular, that God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but of power, love, and discipline. And it is not something to shy away from. It's not something to be timid about. It is something that we need to be on guard, and really start talking to our kids. Start early and speak often and really engage and let them know, hey, this is out there and it's out there to get you, and we're going to protect you. Because just like what you've said, it affects so many children. And the more we've been in this work, we hear from so many people around the world, particularly in our DMs. And it's like, this not only affects our children, it's affecting marriages. And watching young adults become, parents, it's a huge impact of young people becoming addicted to this, becoming husbands, becoming fathers, and even women too. It's not just a male situation. But anyways, I just can't stress enough how we have got to start talking about this and keep talking about this, and just be aware. It's a thing.
Yeah, no, it's a huge thing. And that's why the earlier that you can have it be something you have been talking about for a long time, first about screens, good pictures, bad pictures, have this evolve. It won't be one day when they're 11, you talk to them in one conversation. It has to have been something that you have been kind of laying layers and layers on, if possible, because you don't want to act like you don't know it's happening. And then, because once again, your children will just hide it. And
that's like what she was just saying, is about kind of being the expert. You want to be ahead of this topic. Hey, we got to be careful, because one of our goals at Birds and Bees in general is to get rid of the talk. And if you're just listening, we have quotation marks around the talk, that one-time conversation about sex, which is painful. And so we want to replace that with multiple age-appropriate conversations about sex, where you're establishing yourself as the expert in your home and you are a safe place for your kids to go to with questions. And the same is true for talking about pornography and digital safety. This is not a one-time sit-down conversation. Well, son, here's your phone. You got to be careful because there's porn on there, whatever. It's like, no, these are conversations little by little that we're having over the years that evolve as our children mature and the vocabulary changes as they grow up. And just let them know this is a topic that we are going to move towards.
Yeah. So 2 things you said, the talk, getting rid of the talk. Like, I don't even remember. I think I would remember this too. Like, if my parents sat down and had a talk with me. So I don't really even remember having a talk. Like, I was a farm kid, and there's this, like, way of thinking in the farm community that farm kids just get it. They know how it works. And I'm like, as a mom now, and as somebody who, went through my teenage years and, got married and had kids and all those things, it's not just about knowing, quote, how it works. Like there's so much more that goes into it, in safety and protecting your heart and your faith and your relationship with the Lord and all of these things, besides just knowing how it works. So that's the first thing. But the second thing I just want to ask to clarify, when you talk about good pictures, bad pictures, can you give us like a practical example of how that conversation would work with a young, like you said, 5 or 6-year-old?
Yeah, I think so. Let's say, they're watching TV or they're playing a game on their iPad, or they're going to their cousin's house, something like that. Say, oh, sweetheart, remember, we got to be really careful with what we see. There are some good pictures, but there are also some bad pictures. And then I think with kids, particularly young kids, you have to be pretty clear with your language. Yeah. And so a bad picture, what's a bad picture? Well, sweetheart, a bad picture is something that can kind of make your tummy feel icky. Or a bad picture is something that's really scary. It makes you want to look away. Or, a bad picture is also a picture of someone's private parts. Remember, we never look at somebody else's private parts. And so you're clearly defining what a bad picture is. And then you're giving them action steps. If you see a bad picture, we're going to stop, run, and tell. And kind of tell them, here's what happens if you see a bad picture. Another helpful phrase is, if you see a bad picture, you're not a bad person. And that is, I think, shifting or taking away some of the shame. I feel like there's a lot of shame and secrecy around this topic. And again, you're positioning yourself as, it's not me versus you. You are not the bad person here. Pornography is the enemy in this conversation. And if you see that, you come and tell me, because that doesn't make you a bad person. And there are lots of great resources. One that we love is called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. And it's a great book. But sometimes I think parents can use books as a crutch, and they read it once with their children and then think, well, we're porn proof.
We had that conversation.
Yeah, we
didn't
did it.
Really have a conversation.
Where it's like, we love books, and I think books are awesome. So get these books, but also use them to pull talking points and incorporate them often, before you go over to the friend's house, or before you have your drop-off play date, or before they're going to the cousin's sleepover, or whatever it is. So I would say, to talk about bad pictures, give them an action plan and clearly define what a bad picture is.
Yeah. And part of this has to do with body boundaries, with what Megan just said. And we don't look at other people's privates. And so when we're talking early on in the potty training years, just about how this is your body and other people. And so you have to keep your private parts private. And what does private mean? Every word you have to define for them, because they will make up a definition in their own mind of what that is. So when I say private, I mean other people don't look, touch, or take a picture of your privates. And we have to put that, take a picture in there now, which we didn't used to have to say. And you don't do that with other people. That's a boundary that we set in our family. And once again, you don't have to say it in a super heavy, ominous voice. You can just say, this is just the way it is. This is just how it is. And so, but setting those boundaries in a clear and consistent way, because they won't remember it if you tell them it. If you tell them just once, they have to hear it within the context of, we're having some friends over and y'all like to play upstairs, but we're going to play with the door open, because I'm here for your protection. And if I can't see you or hear you, I can't take care of you. So, just setting some of these boundaries for play and making clear to whoever's in your house, this is our house rule. So it just, even some of the pornography things start with body parts, boundaries, respect for our bodies, respect for other people's bodies.
Vocabulary words for our bodies. Words.
Yes.
That's all super helpful. Even just going back to the examples of, crossing the street or being in the kitchen with a hot stove. And, I think that's going to be a new thought for a lot of people, that it's like, yeah, it can be as simple as like those sorts of things, to just have these conversations. And so you did talk about it a bit already. So we'll just stick there for a second. You guys have talked about the talk and why that's not necessarily the best way to do things anymore. And you guys call it more of the drip, drip, drip method, which is those things with like the hot stove, or, all of these different things, or the body boundaries, like when cousins come over for play or a sleepover or friends. And Yeah, maybe we can just talk a little bit more about that. Like, what does it look like? What kind of body boundaries are we trying to set with our kids? Like, you did talk about it, and I appreciated that. But is there anything else we should know about that, or anything else about the drip, drip, drip method that you want to tell us?
I'll talk about bodies,
okay.
and then you can talk about drip, drip, drip.
Yes.
So kind of echoing what Mary Flo said earlier about body boundaries, we want you to be introducing the anatomically correct words for kids' body parts. So we want you to be saying words like penis and vagina often in your home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for some people, it's like, ooh, are you sure I have to do that? But what we really want to do is give these kids or give our children the anatomically correct words and say it in a way that is frequent and frank. You know, tone of voice is so important with these conversations because so often we just get uncomfortable around this. Like they're taking a bubble bath. Our little kids are around us naked very, all the time. And we kind of say the word privates. We whisper private parts or we say whatever. And I think in that direction, we're kind of creating some shame or secrecy around these parts.
Right.
Like, oh, we can't talk about those parts, or maybe those are bad parts. And then the flip side is to use what we like to call wingy wangy terms, which are, silly words for these silly willy parts. And everybody has them. But then you're kind of enhancing the child's silliness. I mean, if you have young kids, kids are silly about penises and vaginas. That is just the way they are. And that's okay. That's age appropriate. But if we also have silly willy words for them, we're kind of encouraging that silliness. And so we want parents to be in the middle of medical, matter of fact. And these are what they are. These are not bad words and these are not bad parts. And this is something we talk about in our home. Because so often with kids being silly and kids being curious, boundaries are crossed. And not always in, malicious ways, but they're just crossed. And so if we're not speaking in clear terms with our kids, that's when situations can really kind of take an unfortunate direction. And so we want to be above this. So for their safety, we want to let them know, hey, this is your penis. This is a private part. Nobody else can touch this. Or if the brothers are wrestling, oh, guys, put on your underwear, please. Remember, we never touch somebody else's penis. I mean, so you're just saying it like it is. And you're not saying it one time. You're saying it, all the time. When you're helping your little girl get dressed, you're like, oh, let's put our panties on. We got to cover up our vagina. That's a private part. So you're establishing these body boundaries at such a young age because neighbors come over and they play naked in the backyard. And it gives you the opportunity to say, oh, guys, remember, we don't look at other people's private parts. Let's put our clothes back on. Or the cousins are upstairs and they're playing doctor. Say, oh, guys, keep that door open while we play. Remember, we don't touch other people's private parts. So we just want to empower parents to speak into these situations because so often it's just gray. It's a lot of gray terminology. Parents are uncomfortable. Kids are just being curious and parents either overreact, which creates shame in the child and maybe some secrecy of like, well, I guess we'll just hide in the closet next time so she can't find us or whatever it is. So we want to, again, kind of turn the lights on this topic and just speak into these body boundaries.
Yeah, that was really good. And when I was going through some of your Instagram highlights yesterday, I can't even remember which one it was, but you often were sharing like responses that you would get from your followers. And there was one person who was responding from Finland and was talking about how their culture is just so different, right? Like, nakedness into adulthood, like going into saunas and stuff together is just common, right? But the thing is we have to prepare our kids for the culture we live in because there's people who might come out of those cultures and think like, well, why are you making such a big deal of this? Like that's creating the issue. It's like, well, maybe, but the fact is that we are where we are in the US and in Canada, and this is the culture our kids are going to live in. So we have to be preparing them for that culture that they're living in.
Point.
Yeah.
And those conversations about modesty have been so fascinating for us as our audience has grown internationally to hear all these different points of view of like, oh, that does make more sense. Why are we making the problem? But to your point, it's like, well, you are where you are. And we can't have an entire cultural movement about nudity. But it's just interesting. But so much of it is just little conversations, which kind of leads us to this drip, drip, drip approach that Mary Flo's going to explain.
Well, once I realized that the idea of the talk was very ineffective, it's like the uncomfortable conversation at the uncomfortable age. It's all awkward and ineffective. So then what's another option? And another option was to take what we were going to be talking to them at the talk and break it up into lots of little pieces. And so we are going to be talking about birth and conception and reproduction in all living things. We're going to be talking, like you were saying, Rita, not just about the act, but what's the significance of the act? What is the meaning behind this? In Genesis, it does talk about fruitfulness, which would be having children. I want you to be fruitful and multiply, but it also talks about oneness, and you will become one flesh. And so it's a very, not just body, but soul and spirit that is joined together. So there are a lot of components in there. And to put all that in one conversation is just too much. So what we try to do is to realize that in the mind of each child is a sponge. And they're very observant about anything they hear about bodies or birth, or somebody's pregnant, or they go to a wedding and they kissed, and, just they're very alive to all of these things. They absorb all of those things. And so if you picture in the mind of your child a sponge and you label that sponge curiosity about sexual things, that's like the file that goes into. It's a very absorbing sponge. Well, if that's in the mind of all of our children, the idea of the talk is one day you take a pitcher of water and you pour all of it on that sponge at one time, and not very much is absorbed, and it's shocking, and it's a lot, but it's really too much, so it can't be absorbed by the child. But if, on the other hand, you just threw out their childhood, your dripping conversations. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you asked. This is how a baby's born. And for our family, we always started those conversations with, by God's design. Sweetheart, by God's design, this is how a baby's made. By God's design, a husband and a wife were made to fit together in a special way. So just phrases that are small and can be repeated. And it goes along the line that once that sponge is full with all of this good information, and the culture comes along and pours their message on top of it, if it's a full sponge, it doesn't get so quickly absorbed. It kind of rolls off. But if it's a dry sponge, if there's nothing there because you're waiting for them to turn 13 so you can talk to them, then that cultural message gets that first filling. And it's not that it's now impossible to go back and talk to them. Of course it's not, because children hear the voice of their parents in a different way than they hear the culture. But getting there first and filling their sponge with many years of lots of little conversations is kind of the method that replaces the talk. Yes, you're still going to have more mature conversations with your older kids, but now you can do it on the basis of all of these small facts that they now know about, but you can enrich those conversations as they get older about the more meaningful parts of sex. Wow. So that's the strategy.
Because I think it's a little counterintuitive, because I think now, particularly Christian parents today, want to protect their children, and they think the best approach is to make sure nothing goes in their sponge. But to kind of echo what Mary Flo just said, it's like that leaves them really vulnerable. Yeah. That leaves them very exposed to what anyone else wants to say. And so we really do believe that these little conversations, drip, 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 starting at 3 and 4 and all the way up, and little by little, drip, drip, drip. This is the greatest way to protect our children's innocence, is to let them hear our voice and our values. And so that's our hope, is that we can equip parents to start having these drip, drip, drip conversations.
Christmas is just around the corner, and if you're anything like me, you might find that you've been enjoying your family and the season itself to the point that you've forgotten to shop for some of those gifts. I have the perfect solution for you and a coupon code. RocasaOrganics.com has the perfect last-minute gifts that will not appear last minute when they are unwrapped. They are beautifully packaged, and they truly have something for everyone. And you can save 20% off with the code BOOMCLAP. I'm going to tell you a few of my favorite things to keep on hand for those last-minute gifts. I like to buy their loose leaf teas in the tea infuser. It's a perfect gift to put together. Their bath bombs are great. They have handmade
individual soaps that smell great. They also have beautiful candles that are phthalate free, artificial fragrance free. So you can feel good burning them in your home. They smell great. They're truly a clean candle. That's just a few ideas. They truly, though, have something for everyone on your list. Hundreds of products to choose from. Go to rocasaorganics.com and use the code BOOMCLAP to save 20% on your order.
Do you have anything to say, Rita?
A lot, but at the same time, I'm really enjoying listening to you guys. I'm so glad that we get to do this and be on the podcast, because it's so nice to have these really important conversations and not just listen to them, but be a part of them. I just appreciate that. So what would you say to parents, I guess, who maybe didn't start with the anatomically correct terms at a young age, and they do have older kids? And because I know a lot of our listeners do have young kids still, but some of them are in the teen years, and they might be listening to this and hearing you say, like, you can start late, but how would you suggest they do that?
Well, one thing that we think is important is just to go ahead and own that. Like, I've just heard a new idea that it never occurred to me. And
Great point.
I feel like I wish I could go back and do a few things differently. But the thing that we can do is to start differently now. So I may shock you all talking to your kids by saying this, but there's a topic that has never been on the table in our family. And it's coming up. I'm putting it on the table now. But I'm not going to start talking today because I still have some thinking about how I want to do this. But over the next 6 months, in other words, don't make it all up over the weekend. Over the next 6 months, I'm going to be pretty intentional. We're going to take a walk. I'm looking at our schedule, and we have soccer, we have basketball, we have all these activities, but it looks like Tuesday nights are kind of free. So after dinner, we're going to take a walk, because these conversations with older kids are better done shoulder to shoulder than face to face at that dinner table.
Right.
They will pull out the chair and say, no, I can't watch you talk about this. But to say, we're going to take, we're just going to talk about different things. I have some catching up to do, and I want to own it. And so letting them know, I don't think you have to like super apologize. You can just say, it never occurred to me to do it this way. And so now that you are 14 and you're hearing more things, I need to give you the backstory kind of a deal. You know how sometimes you know this information, but you have to go back and know what came before that. So there's a lot of things that I want to cover. I want you to hear my heart, and things that I've never spoken of because no one ever talked to me. I didn't know this was an option. And so we're going to take walks, or, that's the night I do the laundry. So side by side, you are going to help me fold clothes and I'm going to talk. Or that's find a way, or that's the long drive back from the soccer practice. So you're going to be in the car and I'm going to talk, and I'm going to ask questions and you're going to talk. And I want to hear more about what you're learning in your world. And I want you to know how I want you to see this as a family who believes God's word. I want you to hear what he has to say about it too. So I think you can just abruptly interrupt the path that you're on, but then you don't have to do it that day. You can give yourself the grace of some time to think through, okay, here are the topics I feel like I need to catch up on. Here's the backstory on those. Some of them may sound kind of babyish, but I want to be sure you know it the right way.
That's an awesome and healthy piece of advice. Like, I think that's going to be so helpful for so many people. So Thank you for that. Something else that I really want to discuss, and to be honest, it's something that I hadn't really thought about yet. And maybe people do think of it as their girls get a little bit older, but something as simple as shaving the legs, right? And how to have these conversations. I'm like, wow, how did I never consider that? Anyway, so just a discussion on body care. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, but how to approach shaving legs with your girls, or, this is what I have thought about, wearing deodorant, bras, like that stuff. Of course, people do think about a little bit more frequently. But yeah, body care discussion. What do you have to say about that?
So, it's so interesting. Instagram has become a fun place for us to be. I mean, once you once I got over the whole, like, this is so weird to like be a talking head and
So it was her calling. Like she had to be brave.
Yeah, I did. And it sounds bizarre, but I really do feel like the Lord said, get on there and you're the problem.
You do a great job of it.
You're very
She
sweet.
does.
And
She
it
does.
is funny. It's actually been now it's a really fun community and I do enjoy it. But at first, a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, it's so weird. And, and I really do feel like the Lord is like, no, that's where you need to go because that's where the moms are. And so anyways, he's been very gracious to like bless that. And anyways, what I'm trying to say is it is a fun place to be now. And we have an awesome community that makes it a fun place for me to be. And so it's great to also kind of introduce kind of, ancillary conversations. And shaving is something that like I remember so vividly talking to my mom about that. And now my daughter is 11 and all my girlfriends are talking about, are your girls shaving? They're not. And so I thought, I'm going to take this to the Instagram. And it was wild to get. It was like we tapped into a hot topic and we just got flooded with DMs and personal stories and like some traumatizing stories that girls still remember from the way their moms handled it. And I think for me, the resounding takeaway was just the same as we say for all of these topics is like, be the leader in this. Parents, do not put the onus on this onto the child. Like you be the leader and you put it out there of like, if they're 10, 11, whatever, buy that deodorant and just say, hey, just so you know, this is what it's for. I have this in your bathroom drawer if you ever want it. So you're taking the pressure off them for them at this painful little age to say, Mom, someone made fun of me at school today because I was smelly. Painful, or like if their little breast buds are all of a sudden showing through their t-shirt on the playground, don't wait for a friend to point that out to them or ask them to think, okay, well, maybe I need a bra, but I don't want my mom to think I'm growing up too fast or be sad about it. Or I don't want her to be annoyed because she's busy with all the other kids. Like take those emotional pain points off of that sweet baby child, I'm like fighting for these tweens, where it's like, go ahead of them. And not in the sense of like, make them grow up fast. That's not what we're trying to say. But it's like in those tweeny moments, like just be a step ahead. Hey, you know what? I got this pack of 3 sports bras. Some girls are starting to wear them. If you want to, I put them in your drawer. You're kind of making it like a non-thing. And so then if you do have a child who develops prematurely or earlier than you thought, they're already there. Or if you have a child who's like flat as a board and won't, go through puberty for 5 more years, but if the other girls are wearing it and she wants to feel a part of it, they're in the drawer.
It's okay.
It's okay. I think so often we can sometimes moralize some of these discussions or moralize some of these decisions when the reality is it's a hygiene thing. Or it's maybe just like a silly yes that doesn't impact your life, but it makes them feel a little bit more like they're part of the team. And so the shaving thing, it was so interesting. I feel like one of the biggest messages we heard was like, it was so hard for me to bring it up to my mom. Or I brought it up to my mom and she said, no, you're too young. And she made me feel stupid. But all the kids at school were making fun of me. Or I just wish, all this like emotional feedback from these grown women. And, how simple. And again, to go back to this idea, I feel like we're moralizing that where it really isn't a thing. Like that doesn't mean they're a grown up. Doesn't make them like
and it's not a
sexy
sexual thing.
Yeah, it's not. They're not doing it because they want to have smooth legs with the boys. Like, no, they're 10 or 11 or 12 and just
they don't like the way they
don't like it looks or feels. And so it's like, anyways, it was a fascinating conversation. But I think the takeaway is like just for moms to take the lead on this, or to, kind of what we say often is like preempt situations, go ahead of them to protect them, go ahead of them to prepare them. And so the shaving, the deodorant, the sports bras, all those conversations, like just buy them, and put them in their bathroom and be like, hey, now that you're in 5th grade or now that you're in 6th grade, a lot of people are going to start wearing deodorant. I don't know if you've noticed different smells or anything like that. It's very normal. Or even if you just want to, it's in here in your bathroom drawer. I wear it. I put it on every morning. And just, again, you're taking that, kind of taking the edge off the conversations. And again, once again, letting them know like, this is something we talk about. This is a safe place to come to with questions. Or Mom, I don't want to shave. Oh, you don't have to. Absolutely not. But if you ever want to, just know that I'm happy to help. So it's like, you're kind of just like taking the lead role here.
And you're also opening the door for them to come back to you to say, well, some people are, but I don't feel like it's like the right time. Or I feel like they're making me feel like I should, mean, then they can talk to you about some of those things that these women were obviously feeling and never could communicate with their parents. And this is the same thing with their periods. Like, don't wait for them to start their period before they know what periods are. Like, no, this is coming. And so go ahead and buy the products, explain the products, put the products in their bathroom, and just say, maybe you haven't started yet, but maybe you'll have a friend over here who's started their period and they're going to need these things. So, and don't just show them the box, like open it up. This is how it works. This is how you put a pad in your panties. This is how you insert a Tampax, whatever it is, a tampon. It's whatever is so confusing or frightening or intimidating to these girls. Just go ahead and open the door and say, this is not a bad thing. It's natural. It's a natural thing and it's inevitable. So when this happens, I'm on your team. I'm here to show you how this works and answer any of your questions about that. And that just eases the situation.
Well, it's such an uncomfortable age already.
Yes.
There's so many things happening to them and feelings. Just to say, hey, this is all normal. This is not taboo. And I'm here for you. And I feel like just that simple approach. It was a really fascinating conversation.
Yes. And you are in it. And you all are in it, with your girls.
Yep. Been through some of those conversations already. And honestly, like, I felt pretty good about how all of it's went so far as like,
that's great.
But it's finding time for conversations too. That's another thing. Like, I try, like, if one of my daughters is somewhere else, like the youngest one, like, he doesn't know what's going on yet. So it's fine for him to be around. But like, I try to like get some time, like 15 minutes to go on a walk or something. And then like, we just chit chat and then it naturally comes up and we can just, but you said something about like the shaving the legs. It's not necessarily to look good for the boys. And I thought immediately about like why I put makeup on.
Yes.
Like not even to look good for my husband. It's because it makes me feel awake and better about myself to present myself to the world. So anyway, I thought that was a really good point.
It was so interesting. This is where it's just like, it is fun to connect with people. But, so many girls said their mom said something of like, you're too young for that. Or like, who's looking at your legs anyways? Or like that kind of response. And, but to echo what you just said, it's like, it's not about other people. I mean, maybe sometimes if people are making fun of them, but usually it's like, they just kind of want to fit in and they don't like it anymore. And so it's like, I mean, and I can't tell you how many girls start shaving their legs and then forget, and then a couple months go by. It's like, it doesn't have to be this big thing.
Right.
Anyways, but it's just interesting as you kind of dive into some of these issues of like, just peeling back some of these layers of like, even with makeup, oh, you don't need makeup, whatever. It's like, well, sometimes makeup's not about attracting somebody.
Yeah,
exactly. It just is the way you feel good about yourself for whatever reason.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I thought of the same thing because I've actually been in conversations with my boys. They're like, well, why are you putting on makeup? Are we going somewhere? I'm like, no, I just want to put on makeup. Like, I'm not doing this for anyone else except for me. Like, and so I think it's important for girls to know, like, yeah, if you want to shave your legs, that's fine. That's for you. If you want to put on makeup, that's fine. That's for you, but also for boys to know that, right?
For sure.
And I'm glad you brought up periods because that was another thing I wanted to talk to you about. And so we've talked about like how to prepare girls for that in a healthy way, but also for boys to understand and to know and to be able to deal with that, and to deal with it in a healthy and compassionate way. So how do you prepare boys for that as well?
So I think it's a lot easier if they have sisters, obviously. I have, like I said, my oldest is a girl and I have two boys. And I have this weird job. So it does come up a bit more. So I think the goal is for your boys to know the basics. Hey, this is every woman has a period. This is kind of how it works. I think that's what again, so many of these topics, we just don't want them to feel taboo. We don't want them to feel like, oh, we don't talk about that. Or for a boy's point of view, it's so gross. It's like, that's not what we're trying to do here. Like we're hopefully raising, thoughtful, kind husbands and fathers one day. And so they don't have to think, wow, that's fascinating. It's so cool how the woman's body works. I mean, like, we don't have to go. They might think it's amazing. I don't know. But like the goal is just
gynecologist or something.
Yeah. The goal would just be for them to be like, yeah, this is like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We have shared this viral story.
It's so cool.
Which is I think it just is like, this is what you want. This is what parents want, and which why it resonates with so many people. But of a young girl on a school bus, I think, maybe like a freshman in high school or something. And she stands up to get off her spot. And then this guy behind her, who's probably a junior or senior boy, stands up, taps her on the back and says, oh, hey, you've got something on your pants. You can use my sweatshirt. And this young freshman like looks around and mortified. I mean, can you imagine that she has a spot on her pants, whatever. And so she kind of looks at him like this deer in headlights look. And he says, oh, it's okay. I have sisters. And so she takes a sweatshirt and gets out the bus.
Sweet.
And it's such a moving story for moms, I think, because you realize that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
You want a young man who could say, yay, ooh, I get it. Don't worry about it.
Yes.
And not one that's like, oh my God, look at her. Like laughing with friends or doesn't have the gumption to say something, just looks and says embarrassed. It'd be like the empathy, I think we want empathy is such a huge trait, and just to realize, hey, this is normal. This happens. Gosh, that must be embarrassing. I can help her. And I think that is what we want. And so with boys in homes talking about periods, have you ever heard the word period? Well, I know you're going to be going through a lot of body changes, but girls go through body changes too. The period's probably the biggest one. They bleed once a month. I mean, just to educate them as well. I think when they're talking about, their own body changes, give them a little, overview of what girls go through too. And just let them know this is something that happens.
Yeah. And once again, it can start so young. Your children find something in your purse or what is this? Instead of grabbing it and hiding it and acting like that's a scary thing, just say, well, actually, this is something that mommy uses because I have something called a period every month. Now, when they're really little, you don't have to go into the details of that, but you've introduced the word and you've just said it's something that mommies need every month. You've given so few facts, but you haven't made this big deal about it. And then if they want to ask another question about that, they can. But then you have one little leg to stand on, one little brick that you're building up towards these conversations. And like you said, Megan, just help the others see how to empathize, how to be careful about how girls can be careful around boys, boys around girls, and even for girls to realize how visual boys are. What is distracting to them is something that's see-through. And so that's not really very respectful to them. So maybe we're not going to buy these see-through clothes because boys are out there and their moms are trying to help them navigate how visual they are, or, just help them to see that different aspects of male and female are present and you have to show empathy and not, be unaware.
Or even like their voice changes, just, hey, so you're feeling uncomfortable about your body changes and you're feeling kind of weird. Well, they are the boys, their voice is they're going to start cracking their voice, or they're going to start growing and looking like this and different. They're going to be hairy. It's like, so everyone feels insecure about their body changes, so just let them be aware of what's happening in the other gender, and just to be empathetic about it.
You think about the mother of that high school junior or senior, how many little conversations happened before that?
Yes.
Like what did he learn on? Yeah, before the boy on the bus, like what was his childhood like? What did he hear? How did he come to understand that the right thing to do would be to give her my sweatshirt to wrap around her waist? How did he know that? And that was some parenting.
Yeah.
Drip, drip, drip.
Yeah. That story made me just almost cry because that is.
Me too.
Yeah. I was like looking at Rita. I'm like, is she almost crying? Because I'm almost crying.
I don't know why, but it's just something about, I think, not even just the specific situation, but so often you hear about how mean teens are to each other now. And so just any situation where you have, especially a teenage boy to a teenage girl being so kind, it's just not heard of so much.
No, you always hear the opposite. And so there's just something so beautiful about that. And as a mother of boys who are, almost 13 and 11, it's like, that's what you want. You want them to grow into the kind of young man that would do something like that for anyone who's finding themselves in a hard situation. That was really beautiful. Okay, let's talk a little bit about body image. hugely important conversation. So how do you facilitate and nurture positive body image?
Loaded question.
Yes.
I think so. We did a post on this at the beginning of the year. And this is one of those topics that I feel like is a little bit of a side topic from our Birds and Bees curriculum. But we talk about bodies a lot. So we kind of thought, why not? And I shared this quote that I read from an article years and years ago that just really stuck with me. And it was like, how to talk to your kids about bodies. Don't. And I think the message is, and there's lots of nuances we can go into about actually you should hear maybe this, but the overall message is, as moms, we cannot fix everyone's self-esteem issues, right? Everyone's got a lot of baggage and a lot of issues and insecurities, but we can control what we say, and we can control how we speak about our own bodies in front of our children. We can control how we talk to our children about their bodies, how we talk about their friends' bodies, how we talk about our friends' bodies in front of our kids. Oh, she's got such good legs. Or, oh my gosh, if I had that stomach, I'd wear a 2-piece too. Or, oh, I wish, like all these little snippets that we say, oh, can you crop me out of that picture? I look so fat on the edge. Or can we do that again? I need to put my arm out. I mean, we don't realize all these examples that we're saying out loud that our little children are hearing. And it makes me really passionate about it because it's like, bite your tongue.
Right.
Bite your tongue because your kids are listening. And again, I'm not here to think that everyone has to feel like so awesome about themselves, but like, maybe just kind of take a not bad approach,
Right.
Not so bad. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm healthy. I'm happy. Not so bad. And like, don't make it a thing. And again, we can't fix everybody's internal issues or childhood stimmings, insecurities, whatever, but we can control what we say and don't say. And I think in this culture of bodies and images and photos and Photoshop and angles and lighting, if we could just not talk about it in front of our kids, I think that could be a huge, powerful shift.
Even a dress size. I think dress sizing is such a big deal. Like if you change dress sizes when you have children, which you do, like that's just going to be part of it. Don't act like it's the end of the world because now I'm this size instead of this size. It's okay. You're healthy, you're strong, you're vibrant, your body does amazing things. Let it be. And the same with your children, not to be, oh, well, I guess we're a large now. No, we're not going there. So we're so used to being overly aware ourselves that I just loved that phrase that Meghan used. Just zip it.
Because sometimes we can try to do it in a meaningful way of like, oh, or as the kids get older, I'm like, oh my goodness, your legs are looking so good or something like that. Well, if you're complimenting, a certain time, they're going to read into, well, she hasn't said that in a while. Or like, oh, now that I quit cross country, my mom hasn't said that about my legs since then. So it's just such a sensitive, delicate topic where it's like, there's so many other things we could be saying. There's so many other topics we could be talking about. Or, God, I could tell you're just in such a good mood after you run. I'm so proud of you for working so hard. Or, man, I can, there's so many other things we could talk about besides someone's legs or flat stomachs or, oh my gosh, look at her arms, they're so ripped. It's like, there are just so many things we could do besides that. And like, I think as women, we can all collectively say there are so many issues around this that I just think, and I'm a talker. And so I'm like, if you could just stop talking, that would be my message about this. Because I think there's so much more to life than
comparisons.
Yeah.
It's just none of that is healthy.
No.
They always end up going from whatever innocent way you meant it. It goes down from there. Like they take that, but they don't hear just the surface. They internalize it, and in always not a good way. They assume that you meant that as a criticism.
And just a last thought on that things not to say is all the food conversations. How often as moms are we like, oh, I'd eat all those nuggets too if I had your metabolism.
Yeah, no.
Or like, oh man, I would no dessert for me. Thank you. Just got 5 pounds to go. I mean, that kind of stuff, we say it all the time. And it's like, what are we teaching our young girls? Yep. What are we telling them? That, oh, moms can't have that. Or like, ooh, that'll go straight to my thighs. I mean, all these things that we say flippantly, that to cut ourselves down or whatever. It's like, we do not want that for our girls. So why are we saying that out loud? Just bite your tongue. Just don't talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's
This part
That's
hits
what I feel
home
strongly about.
big time. Like Cecily knows this about me, but I struggled like a lot of my late teens to early 20s with disordered eating. And I never had an eating disorder per se. Like I wasn't anorexic, I wasn't bulimic, but I would massively overeat because I couldn't control it because I spent so much time controlling. And then I would massively overexercise. And I always looked the same size, but I had this constant thing on my brain. And like, I would daily count calories as like an 18-year-old. That's insane. Like to tally up your calories and try to keep it to like 1,200. And then like you can only do that for so long and that's nothing. And then you way overeat. And so now like, and my mom didn't say those things to me about calories and things, but the grocery store aisle was filled with like women's magazine weight loss. And other women in my life were always on a diet. Like they were just always on a diet. I remember my birthday was during, my birthday's March 1st. So it was always during Lent. And people were never eating chocolate cake at my birthday party because they gave up sweets for Lent. And I'm like, okay, at some point, this isn't for Lent. This is a diet plan. Anyway, so like you said, the way I talk to my girls about food is just for health. Like we're not doing this to maintain a size. We're eating this way so we can be healthy. So I can chase you because I'm 41 years old and I have an 18-month-old. Like I want to be able to chase him and be around for him for a very long time. And so I agree with you. It's so important. And so important not to say those things like, if I had your metabolism, like I specifically remember that. And like that impacts a young girl.
It does.
And it's not to say we cannot control the culture. We can't control magazines or Instagram. And like, there's so many things out there that are going to impact our kids. But what we can control is what we say. And so we would just encourage parents to
Absolutely.
Yeah, very helpful. So one final thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about was sex ed classes, right? If your kids go to private school, if they go to public school, this will be happening at some point. So how, as parents, can you prepare for the sex ed discussion? And how can you become aware of like, what exactly does that entail at my kid's school? And if my kid is going to be in attendance for that, how can I prepare them? Or, you know, like the whole conversation. How do you prepare everyone for that?
Well, I'm so glad you started with how can we prepare ourselves? How can we know exactly what's going to be there? I feel very strongly that parents have every right to go to the school and to say, I want to see the curriculum. I'd like to know how you're going to handle questions and answers. Will both boys and girls be there? Like I'd have a list of questions and concerns. And, you know, assuming the best as you walk up there, that this might be a really good class and this might be a really good teacher and they may have figured this out. But I feel like you need to be able to picture what this is going to be like, have a copy of the curriculum, and then you can see that curriculum and say, okay, I need to put my voice into these things before they hear about this. And then I would also challenge the school. If you think, you know what, I don't think it's right for Q&A to be both boys and girls together, or whatever it is that you would like to see done differently. I know years ago at this middle school down the street, the parents ahead of my parents did that. It made all the difference in the world. In fact, they were so proactive. Like there were 20 parents that went up to the school and they said, we want you to give the class to us. And we want to ask questions and we want to know how you're going to answer them. So they did a mock class with the parents.
Great idea.
And the parents. And as a result, the next year we got to go. We didn't knock the door down like they did the year ahead of us. But the next year it was like, okay, we'll be having our mock sex ed class. It's like, oh, great. So you can be kind of a proactive parent up at the school, not to be annoying, but this is making an impression on your kids, knowing what's there, and then being, you know, as you go through the curriculum, think, okay, we have never covered this. So you're about to hear about this. So I want to give you my take on it.
And I think all that is so wise, just to, again, kind of it falls in line with what we do a lot with Birds and Bees, which is to be a proactive parent, to be ahead of this. Now, I think sometimes people have a knee-jerk reaction of, well, I'm going to pull them out. They're not going, and obviously every school is different. Every kid's different, all these things. Like that might be the best thing for you. I don't know. But sometimes that comes with repercussions of, well, then they're going to hear about it the next day when everyone's still talking about it. And then there's this mystery and all this stuff. So, I mean, sure, that might be the best thing. But I think what Mary Flo was just saying is figure out what they're going to say. I think talking about Q&A and then talking to your child, like we had there's not so much sex ed one, but fourth grade was like body stuff. And so I looked at the slides, I went through the slides with my child and nothing was new for her. I said, this will probably be really boring because you know all this information. But if something comes up, ask me some questions, but just want you to see what they're going to talk about tomorrow. And she was like, okay, cool, whatever. But I think just to, again, go ahead of them and be proactive. And I love that example of, talking about the Q&A and splitting up boys and girls and getting a mock presentation. There's so many ways to do it, but I would say just be engaged and go ahead of them.
And tell the kids there may be some questions that come up. I would love to know what those questions are. So, if you hear something tomorrow that we've never talked about, I'd really like to know because sometimes people have different takes on that.
Yeah, that was good. Very good. And just out of curiosity, was that a public school or a private school that did the mock class?
It was a public school.
It was a public school. That's awesome.
Yes.
So,
and it was, and the coach was doing it. And some of his answers to questions were challenged, and so it was a really healthy, but it was somewhat controversial the first year, but they learned so much from it. And the counseling team at the school, one of the counselors, I taught Sunday school with her. She was, and so I knew she was a Christian, and they were wanting to do the best they could to be respectful and have a respectful tone. And so we had kind of a benefit of having that counselor who was overseeing this, but still it was a public school.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's great. Very helpful for people, I'm sure, because I do think that the general reaction is like, oh, I'm just going to keep them home, And of course, things are different in different places too. Like Texas might be different than Oregon or British Columbia where I live or Illinois or, I think every place is going to be a little bit different, which is why it is so important for parents to do the homework, like you said, to just kind of figure out like what is going to be said, because maybe we used to live in Texas and maybe now we live in Seattle, and we just need to be very aware that maybe things aren't going to be exactly the same. And like we said earlier, we don't live in Finland. We live in the US and Canada. So we need to prepare for that. Right. Same with this, right? Like, yeah, very helpful.
But like Megan said, though, like, regardless, if you keep your kids at home, there's going to add mystery to it potentially, and they're going to talk about it the next day. So even if you keep your kids home, because you might live in Illinois near Chicago, and they are wanting to hide things from your kids or from the parents that they're teaching to the kids, rather. And so if you're not having the conversation at home, still your kid's going to go to somebody else and hear things. So you need to be talking about these things regardless, right?
And I like what Mary Flo said. I think it's just communication 101 of assuming the best. I feel like that's always a well-received approach towards a possibly conflicting situation. So to go to these schools instead of being like, what do you think you're going to be teaching my kids here at this program? It's like, whoa.
Find out first. Yes, find out
no,
first.
Thank you. It was like, wow, okay, I can tell y'all put a lot of work into this program. I'm just curious about a couple things. Would you have a minute to explain some of the slides that y'all are going to be going over? I mean, just like a little nuanceness can really change some of these conversations. And you might look through all these slides and think, yeah, I just don't know if this is the best fit for us. So it's not to say you have to go, but I would say assume the best and do your research.
Very good. Rita, is there anything else that you would love to ask them before we wrap things up?
I don't think I have any more questions. I mean, I'm sure I do, and I'll think of them later. But I've just really appreciated this conversation. Mary Flo, I don't know if I should say this, but like you're past your young mothering years, obviously. And I just appreciate like we don't have a lot of elder women like pouring in and willing to do this, willing to put themselves out there social media wise, like speaking, all of these things. And so I appreciate that because I feel like a lot of times younger moms are just figuring things out on their own. And so I don't know. I think it's really nice. Actually, I do have one question. This has nothing to do with like just teaching us anything, but just from the standpoint of building your business without Instagram, without social media, without all those things and getting all those speaking engagements and things going. Do you find that it was easier to grow something than organically, or I don't know, just the difference? This is just a very random question, but
I think it was necessary then to be what I would call a little bit obscure. Like you can learn a lot without the spotlight being on you. And that's one of the things that I'm so grateful for all those years of doing it kind of literally on my own, because I was interacting with the parents. I was raising my own children. We were living this out. And I think that helps to give Meghan the confidence with a lot of the answers. Like there's this whole foundation of information that we're standing on. We just didn't think about it yesterday.
yeah.
And so I think that foundation of many years of just kind of pursuing and refining the message and the talking points, the considerations, all of that were there. So that had to be there. But now the growth has really happened through Instagram, but it's growth from a really deep foundation. So the benefit is it's bearing fruit now, but I think it had a firm foundation. So I'd say both were necessary.
That's interesting because I do find that now if people are starting something out, it's like you've got to do all, like Cecily and I feel this doing a podcast, like you got to do all these things. You can't just do a podcast and have really great people on. You got to figure out how to make a reel and put it on YouTube and make covers and like, oh, it's like all this stuff. And it's like, how do you just find time to research even, So it's really, I don't know. That's something that just hit me when you were talking at the beginning. I was like, I really want to ask her about this.
Yeah.
And we both just say like, I couldn't have done this work without her. And it couldn't be where it is without me as far as Instagram. But it's like, it's a yin yang and a balance where I think we both are really grateful and benefiting from what everyone's adding to this. And I wouldn't be able to just pop on Instagram and grow this thing if I was making stuff up. It's like we have this 30-year startup, we call it, of like the 30 years of experience of parents, of training, of questions. And so we have a good story to share and grateful to have a platform that makes things sharing easy.
And Meghan is living it out right now. And the culture is different now. The things that we were teaching our preteens, we're teaching our elementary school. And so she's made all those adjustments, but they've been appropriate to what you were talking about earlier. This is where we are now. We need to react to where we are right now. But a lot of them, the biology's the same, the Bible's the same, but all of these questions and can be anticipated through that lens in our current culture. Like, so yeah, it's all of the things that she's doing on Instagram have just enhanced the 30 years of research and development. So it's exciting to see how it's all come together right now. It's really a blessing.
It is cool. Even from the outside looking in, just hearing your story. And I don't know, I just really enjoy that. I can't imagine what it would be like to have that 30-year base before starting something new, like starting this new leg of like Instagram and the digital course, that really is a blessing. And God clearly had a very specific plan in mind for you guys. So it's very cool.
Well, thanks. It's been a wild ride. I think every once in a while, just to even y'all are so sweet and gracious to ask us about those kind of questions. Cause it's like, wow, he has been so faithful.
Yes.
And
very faithful.
It's not at all, I didn't even think I'd be working at this point, and here I am, sex ed person. It's like, you just never know.
Yeah.
But it's been fun.
I know our one of our grandchildren the other day we were having dinner and she said, so my grandmother name is Flo. So Flo, how did you start this company? Well, yeah, I guess we did start a company. It's like, yeah. And so I said, well, it was your mom's question that got us all started. So,
what's really amazing is we do talk to so many women who have built these incredible businesses who, when we ask them questions like that, they're just like, yeah, it was kind of by accident. Like it just snowballed, which is really cool, because I think sometimes that's God's plan. It's like, you don't know that this is coming, but I'm just going to snowball it for you. And before you know it, 30 years are going to pass. And you're going to have this business partner and it's going to be like doing things that you never even imagined. And other times I think, it's God's plan for you to have a business, but it doesn't just necessarily snowball, like there's all these different stories of how God uses things. So I love hearing it. I love hearing all the different stories from people. So thank you for that. Now,
you're welcome.
Let us know. We've talked about it a bit too. Obviously, you guys have this digital course. Tell people where they can find your website, the course. People are definitely going to want to follow you on Instagram if they're not yet. So let us know all of these things.
So if you want more Birds and Bees, you can find our online course at our website, birds-bees.com. In the online course, you buy it, you have access, lifetime access. You can watch it again and again, watch it with friends, your spouse, whatever. A lot of times people will watch it and then watch it a few years later when their middle kid gets to third grade or something. So the online course is on our website, and then you can follow us on Instagram at birds__bees. And we share lots of talking tips and lots of engagement from the community. So yeah, find us there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is one of those episodes that when I was preparing for it the day before, it's like I knew I was going to love it. But then after I had the outline prepped and had kind of spent a little bit of time on their Instagram and website, I was like, oh, this is going to be a good one. And sure enough, it was. They were amazing. So don't forget, guys, if you want to check out their online course, click the link in the show notes, use the code BOOMCLAP, and that's going to save you some money on purchasing that course. And I think based on this conversation, you can see it'll probably be well worth it. Don't forget, leave us reviews. We'd be so appreciative. They mean the world to us, you guys. They not only help propel the podcast forward, they just put us in a really good mood for the day. And it's the first thing we'll share with each other if we see a new review. So please do that. Subscribe, follow, engage on Instagram. All of these things are ways that you can help the podcast out. And we want to let you know what we have coming next week. We have an incredible conversation next week with a man named Brian McConaughey. I hope I'm saying his last name right. But he just has the most incredible story. Like, I don't even know how I can summarize it for you, but just very interesting story. A sniper with the RCMP ended up getting hugely impacted by the reality of what people are going through in war-torn countries, Cambodia in particular, human trafficking. You are not going to want to miss it. It's going to be amazing. So
just a conversation I feel like we're shielded from. That's the best way I can think of. Like something that if you don't listen, you don't know about.
Right.
Yeah.
And then once you do listen, it's just like, whoa. It changes you, It changes you. So make sure you tune in for that. And as always, thank you for listening. If you want to find us outside the podcast, you can find us on Instagram at BoomClapPodcast, or individually, I'm on Instagram at Cecily.Dickey, or my website, thegracetogrow.com.
You can find me at RitaRogersCo.com or Rita Rogers Co on Instagram. Thanks for listening.